Secrets from the Eternity. A fictional and horror-illustrated podcast series created by Rig. Chapter 3. Enigmas and Ancestral Origins. Under the dark cloak of 2 o'clock in the morning, Sandra walked into the heart of Little Tokyo. Following the bunker precise instructions, she made her way to an old laundromat, now under reconstruction, where she was to deliver the vital information obtained at La Panamericana. Inside the enclosure, in a room that still retained the pungent smell of bleach and soap, Teofilo Clemens was immersed in reading a black notebook. Seated behind a worn desk, he slid his fingers over pages full of notes, glyphs and cryptic texts that only a few were able to decipher. Patiently, he waited for Sandra's arrival. After a brief wait in the shadowy space, the faint creak of a door opening reached Teofilo's ears. In the semi-darkness of the corridor, he perceived a silhouette moving elegantly, its form projecting and blurring with the shadows of the walls. Without warning, the female figure of Sandra emerged, standing firmly in front of him.
Good evening, Agent Sandra. We finally meet in person. I was looking forward to you,
stated Teofilo in a deep voice full of mystery. With an ethereal tinge to her tone, almost as if her voice emerged from another time, Sandra replied,
Good evening, Inspector Edwards.
Oh, I see. You may have been disconcerted by my presence. No, the Inspector Edwards has been redeployed to an assignment in Central Europe. I will be in command of this investigation. My name is Teofilo Clemens, 5th leader of the bunker.
Suddenly, a memory popped into Sandra's mind, and in it she saw the face of Teofilo Clemens, linked to one of her first missions for the bunker.
Teofilo Clemens,
murmured Sandra with a tinge of surprise and caution.
I wasn't aware of your intervention.
Thanks to her sharpened supernatural sense, she noticed that Teofilo's heart rate did not vary at all, leading her to believe in the veracity of his words.
Many of us, the leaders of the bunker, have been on the front lines in the field. It's not unusual for us to get personally involved in certain missions, Agent Sandra.
I can imagine. And I suspect Mickey Malone is just the tip of the iceberg.
Sandra reflected, feeling deep inside that a reason of great magnitude led Teofilo Clemens to sit in front of her that night.
There are specific matters that require your attention, Agent Sandra. It is imperative to the bunker that this investigation be conducted as meticulously as possible,
Teofilo said, pinning his gaze on Sandra's.
You have my full attention,
Sandra replied, her tone denoting seriousness and determination.
Before we go any deeper, please give me the data you collected at the club.
Teofilo held out his hands expectantly towards Sandra, who without hesitation complied.
Here is the reel and tape with photographs and audios of the meeting. Mickey the Raven Malone is planning a gun and alcohol deal. Among his conspirators is the mayor of Los Angeles City, Trevor Douglas.
Teofilo narrowed his eyes, pondering the new information.
We already had hints of Malone's machinations, but the mayor's involvement was something we hadn't anticipated. With what you have provided us, we will be able to inform our allies in the White House. And yes, we already have an undercover agent positioned closer to Trevor Douglas than anyone might suspect.
I want to add one detail. Malone radiated a disturbing confidence. I recognized in his ranks members of the Benedetti and Vincenti families, Italian clans of great power. These are dynasties that have historically funded elite battalions for generations.
Sandra commented, her voice laden with seriousness. Teofilo, with a frown, reflected.
What you point out is valuable. The Benedettis are in our files, and we know that during the First and Second World Wars, they provided funds for the purchase of armaments. In more recent times, we have identified signs that they have established secret factions opposed to the government. Their objective: maintain a tension that will allow them to continue to profit from arms sales to the authorities. However, that is a matter that, at the moment, is not within our radius of action.
As he spoke, he interlaced his fingers with a steady, deep gaze.
Agent Sandra,
Began Teofilo, his tone more serious than ever.
after your first contact with Mickey Malone, we face a situation that requires further intervention on your part. For years, we have been on the trail of a priceless object, the orb of Anubis, a centuries-old Egyptian relic. Recently, it was stolen from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and our sources indicate that a Malone associate was involved in its theft.
As Teofilo spoke, Sandra, with her supernatural abilities, sensed a change in the environment. She could detect a slight increase in the adrenaline emanating from Teofilo's body, evidence of the importance and danger surrounding this artifact. Hers vampiric nature allowed her to accurately identify chemicals released by living beings, even at a great distance. With an emphatic gesture, Teofilo extended a sealed envelope to Sandra.
Inside, you will find precise data about the orb and the last place it was seen. An object of such magnitude cannot fall into the wrong hands. It is imperative that you retrieve it.
With determination in her voice, Sandra stated,
I understand. I will hatch a plan to approach Malone again and discover which of his allies is in possession of the relic.
Okay, Agent Sandra, here is the list you asked us for in exchange for the evidence you provided.
Teofilo handed her a sealed envelope. His gaze scanned Sandra's before continuing.
It's none of my business, but if for some reason you or someone close to you is facing a serious illness, we at the bunker can offer help.
The woman of semi-human nature took the envelope.
I appreciate the offer, but it won't be necessary.
Sandra replied, her tone cold and resolute, hiding the true intentions of that list. Teofilo nodded, though a hint of suspicion crossed his eyes.
We will be in touch shortly. I wish you luck, Agent Sandra, and I hope that in the near future we can have a meeting at our main headquarters.
After sealing the tacit agreement, Sandra left the building. Teofilo stayed in the laundry room for a few more minutes, visualizing the pages of his black notebook and capturing new details and reflections. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Leonardo Rossi Barbieri, Mickey Malone's head of security, was in the monitoring room of La Panamericana, reviewing the recordings from the entrance and alley cameras. He had previously instructed two of his subordinates to dispose of the bodies and any evidence in that same alley. And now, he hoped to see something that would shed light on what had happened. The brightness of the screens first revealed Sandra Piamonte leaving through the front door of the club. Not long after, he saw two men staggering, clearly drunk, following the same route. But what happened in the alley puzzled him. The limited lighting only showed blurry figures, mixed with creeping shadows. And after a quick movement, one of the two bodies collapsed, inert, on the pavement. Next, the second body appeared under the same circumstances. Shadows obscured the details, but the evidence was clear. Something or someone had taken down the two men. As he reviewed the images, Leonardo muttered to himself.
That's strange. Why the shadows? At least it looks like the woman was not attacked. It could have been a night vigilante. But why the marks on their necks and their pallor?
He felt a shiver run down his spine. He picked up the radio and dialed Mickey Malone's number.
Boss, I've checked the tapes. Can you talk?
Yes, Rossi, tell me.
Malone's hoarse voice was heard on the other end. Leonardo cleared his throat.
The two guys who were at the bar come out behind the woman in red. They follow her into the alley. But the cameras don't quite capture what's going on in the dark. She disappears into the shadows. Then there is a black silhouette moving quickly and boom, the two drunks suddenly fall to the ground. I'm sorry, boss, I can't be sure what happened to the woman, but it looks like she got away from the alley. Most likely, it was some kind of a vigilante wearing in black who helped her to escape.
Malone grunted slightly.
We can't leave loose ends, Rossi. Investigate that woman. Her name is Sandra Piamonte. I need to know everything about her.
Roger that, boss. I'll take care of it.
There was a brief pause before Malone asked.
Have you finished the cleanup in the alley? Did you get rid of the bodies yet?
Yes, everything is done. I moved their bodies to the port. They're now in the freezers.
Malone looked satisfied but hesitant at the same time.
Good. I'll send one of our forensic guys tomorrow to find out more about the cause of death. Make sure someone from your team assists him.
Yes, boss.
Leonardo commented, closing the radio communication. Shortly after leaving the gloomy bowels of the laundry, Sandra wandered through streets that seemed to be taken from an old story until she came to an avenue. There, in the gloom, she waited for a cab, emulating the appearance of someone returning from a night party. Although several centuries had left a deep imprint on her being, she had acquired skills and wisdom, learning to camouflage herself among mortals without succumbing to the prevailing desire to feed on them. Soon, the twinkling lights of a cab broke the darkness, revealing an American Motors car's SST automobile that stopped before her ethereal figure. Stepping inside, the driver, a man of weathered countenance and Arab origin, about 55 years old, with a bushy beard and marked eyebrows, recognized her, and with a smile that reflected untold stories, inquired,
"Same place as always, Miss Piamonte?"
That's right, Hakim. Please take me there.
Sandra replied with an assurance that defied time. After answering him, Sandra leaned back in the back seat, allowing the night breeze to caress her face through the partially open window. The city lights passed by like fleeting trails, and the sound of the cab's radio playing classic jazz enveloped the space in a serene atmosphere. As the wheels of the cab clattered on the pavement and Hakim meandered through the streets, Sandra was lost in a sea of thoughts. The list of patients afflicted by this enigmatic virus disturbed her deeply. Its victims, predominantly young people, tended to be those caught in the clutches of intravenous drug use. Within an alarmingly short period of time, their immune systems would suffer heartbreaking onslaughts, leading them down an inexorable path to a fatal fate. With a throb of anxiety reverberating in her immortal chest, Sandra fervently hoped she would not find a particular name on that list, a name that evoked echoes of a past that still beat in her heart. Since her cruel transformation into a vampire, she had been torn from her original lineage, but through the centuries, she had quietly followed the lives of her descendants, watching over them from the shadows. The memory of her family always unleashed a whirlwind of images in Sandra's mind. It was as if time had stopped on that rainy October night in 1435. She saw with painful clarity her father, Francesco Piamonte, a charismatic Italian merchant specializing in clothing and crafts, as he guided his family toward Brasov, a flourishing enclave in southeastern Transylvania. Next to him, Alice Floyd, Sandra's mother, of delicate Welsh origin, and three loyal protectors, the twins Giovanni and Luca Maggiani, and his cousin Federico Maggiani. The echo of Meredith's laughter, Sandra's sister, resonated in her memory. She had wished to join the voyage, But the strong demand for a prosperous trade led Francesco to insist that she remain overseeing business in Florence. As the moon, hidden behind a blanket of clouds, left the land in a palpable gloom, the group decided to pause and rest near the Olt River, not far from the town of Slatina. They were a few hours away from Brasov, and everyone felt the weight of the journey on their shoulders. But when the hourglass struck midnight, an unusual silence hung over the camp. Giovanni and Federico, who should have been nearby, had disappeared without a trace into the dark vastness of the surrounding forest.
Giovanni, Federico, where are you? Answer me!
Shouted Francesco, icy fear coursing through his veins at not finding them near the coach. Memories of stories from locals about that area flooded his mind. Stories of gangs of criminals lurking in the shadows, attacking unwary merchants and lone travelers. The air seemed charged with the electricity of impending danger. Despite their desperate calls and cries, silence was the only answer, interrupted only by the dripping of raindrops on the leaves and the roar of the storm gaining intensity. With fear racing through their hearts, they decided to hasten their journey towards Brasov. However, as they advanced only a few meters, a macabre vision stopped their steps. The silvery reflection of Giovanni and Federico's armor, suspended high up in a tree, with their mutilated bodies hanging grotesquely. The rain washed away the pouring blood, creating a disturbing crimson shower. Suddenly emerging from the darkness, a hideous figure, a grotesque fusion of man and beast, stood defiantly before them.
What the hell is that? Luca, draw your sword!
Commanded Francesco in a trembling voice.
Yes, Francesco!
Muttered Luca, his trembling voice betraying the panic that seized him. In an instant, the entity pounced on them. Claws emerging from its fingers, sharp as steel razors, sliced the air before slitting their throats. The beast reveled, greedily drinking the blood that flowed from their necks. The screams of agony from Francesco and Luca disturbed Alice, who, with terror-filled eyes, urged Sandra to hide in the compartment of the chariot.
Sandra, quick, hide under the seat. I love you, my daughter.
But before they could act, the monstrosity was already inside, its gaze fixed and merciless upon them. After a few brutal and precise movements, the monster grabbed Alice, and with a violent twist and an ominous snap, her life vanished as he feasted on her blood. Sandra stood motionless, horrified, watching the beast with burning red eyes, pale skin with greyish tones, and fangs reminiscent of those of a predatory feline. Without a moment to react, the creature already had her firmly in its grip, and she felt the sharp sting of its fangs piercing her skin. Sandra's world began to darken, but in its fading, a bright glow flooded her vision.
Will this be the end of me?
Thought Sandra, in what seemed like an eternity, condensed into seconds. A deafening roar broke the silence, and flames and sparks erupted inside the vehicle. A bolt of lightning, like a divine act, had penetrated the roof of the chariot, forcing the creature to retreat and lose itself in the darkness of the forest. Although she had been freed from the beast's fangs at that moment, Sandra knew that from that day on, their lives would be intertwined forever. Secrets from the Eternity. A fictional and horror-illustrated podcast series created by Rig. In our next chapter, the destinies of Sandra Piamonte and Leonardo Rossi Barbieri will converge in a dispute full of surprise, action, and suspense, while Mickey the Raven Malone will understand the reason why the Orb of Anubis may be the perfect artifact to achieve his ambitious and ruthless plans. Thanks for listening. Please stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us in our social media channels.